All right, welcome to the next video. In this one, we are going to talk about a little more technique. We've gone through lots of stuff, some philosophy. We've hit on the routines and the timing intervals and the 3 times a day and the types of book. Now let's talk about the common question that I get. Ty, do you read, Shakespeare with speed reading? Do you read biographies fast? Do you read how-to? Okay, so here's the basic rule. Remember we talked about 3 types of books, classic, how-to, and biographies? Okay. Here's the order of speed with which you should try to read. The fastest would be the how-to books. The classic books, a little bit slower, and the biographies, you read the slowest. Why? How-to books, generally, now this is a really good one, but a lot of how-to books only have 1 or 2 relevant points for you. The rest is fluff. The publisher is not going to accept a book from an author with 10 pages, right? Even if they only have 10 good pages of information. So they got to put, they have to just say lots of stuff and stories and da-da-da and da-da-da to fill up the pages so they can sell you the book for 20 or 30 bucks. But if you whittle the book down, a lot of it's just anecdotal stories backing up the central thesis of the book. So in a how-to book, you just need to figure out the central thesis and just the part of the central thesis relevant to you. The rest, they're only going to put in stories that back up their own central thesis. So it's not like you're reading a debate type paper where maybe you're going to get new information. No, the information is going to back the central thesis. So that one you read the fastest. When I'm reading in the next video, I'm going to show you some actual techniques on how to read real fast. So, when I read this book, I can read this one fast. It's pretty big type. It's a how-to book. Mostly it's 350 pages. I mean, this one I might be able to knock out in 5 to 25 minutes, depending on how focused I am. I'll show you how in the next coming up. So, the how-to books I read pretty darn fast. I read them when I'm lunch, falling asleep. It works out pretty well. Classics, I read the next, because depending on the classics, like I was reading Homer, sometimes I can read that pretty fast, especially if it's in a version where the English is a little more plain. Shakespeare, a little bit slower, obviously. Darwin and Freud sometimes spoke very clearly. I find some of those great classic people to be very clear. Obviously, some philosophers, if you're reading Wittgenstein or some of these, guys where you're blown away by the complexity. What's the one guy that's so complicated? Oh, I forget. There's one philosopher, a German philosopher that's, Heidegger. Those kind of guys, obviously, you just happy to understand one sentence. But for the most part, classics are read at a moderate pace. So what I generally look for is just reading one section of them. If I only have 15 minutes to read, I'm just going to read one section of that classic work, okay? But you can generally, a good bit of them you can move along nicely. Lastly, the biographies. The reason that I don't want to read biographies too fast is multiple reasons. Remember I said the first video, you got to have the first step here. You have to have end game to every action that you take, because some of you I hope are in my the 67 steps, and some of you are in the more advanced business thing where it's called my investor entrepreneur mini MBA program. It's for people trying to grow a business, become an entrepreneur, get $1 million business, make 6 figures, make financial independence. And there I talk about that you have to be an investor. And so investors always have what Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People talks about, the end in mind. As Seneca, the philosopher, said, the worst thing in life is having a goal and getting it and realizing you didn't want it. Joel Salatin used to say, Tyler, the worst thing is getting good at the wrong thing. So when you read an autobiography with the goal of speed reading it, forgetting that the goal of the biography is to give you courage through a human story that you can relate to, well, then you're doing it all wrong. But once you know your end game goal for a biography is that you intimately being able to almost project yourself into their life, then you want to read it. Then you want to stop and smell the roses and read the descriptions where they talk about, their mom and walking down the street and the flowers. That is the book you read the slowest. And also, since we said the symbiotic endgame goal is to fall asleep, you don't want to be too intense late at night reading and, intensely going. It's too much. And both of the endgame goals will go down the tube. Okay? So I think it's very important that you set realistic goals for your reading. You are not going to speed read. Let me add. You're not going to speed read a biography, but the next component is, some people ask me, the complexity of books. So there's an element of complexity that has to be factored in. In 15 minutes, you will not read Schopenhauer, Heidegger, or Karl Marx, or Descartes. You're just not going to. So there you got the same amount of, it's kind of like money. If you go to Beverly Hills and you have a $100 bill, you just know you're not going to get as many clothes. But you might get one really, really nice thing on Rodeo Drive. You go there to Rodeo, it's expensive. But you get stuff of value. So these books that are a little deeper, a little more meat, a little more complexity to them, you will not get through the volume, but it's made up, if you're reading the right book, it's made up with density of knowledge. Does that make sense? So very important that you look at the ratio, and the only reason you can read this so fast is because the density isn't always there in how-to books. So if you notice, what ends up happening if you were doing the math, if you're an engineer, is that you're getting the same wisdom, knowledge, experience, insight from 15 minutes reading a classic book where you only get through one page as you do if you were reading much more faster, much more quickly in like a speed reading pace, which we're going to talk about. If you were reading in a speed reading pace of a how-to book that's less dense. You can only take away so much. Your brain has a certain pace to it. It has a certain amount of muscle, and it will take you a while to build up to be able to imbibe and suck in vast quantities of complex subjects too quickly. So at the end game, the pace, the parity is pretty much there. You're taking in only about, a spoonful. When you're going to first start this, you're going to be like a baby. It's like a straw, right? It's like a pacifier. It's like one of those sippy cups. Then you get a little older, you'll be able to take in more complex food, more, meat. And then as you go older and stronger, you'll be able to take it more. Don't be afraid to vary the pace for the type of books. So now next one I'm going to show you here in a second. I'm going to actually read a book with you. Okay? So, and you might have seen me do this before, but I want to do it a little more, show you a little bit more. So to close out this video, unlock the next one, I want you to answer this question. Okay? What's an example of a book that you tried to speed read that was too dense where you ended up not taking anything away? Some more. Number 2 question. What is an example of a book that you read much too slowly that only had one nugget, the density wasn't there, but you mismatched how long you read it for? You should have read it for, an hour, and you read it over a week. All right? And thirdly, okay, what is a specific book that you're going to set a pace for right now? So pick a book that's on your mind to read and how much you're going to allocate. Get good at beginning or begin building the skill of estimation. I like to estimate when I get a book. This book I'm going to spend about 30 minutes. So estimate a book. That's the 3rd question below this video, and that'll unlock the next one. So I'm going to see you on the next one where we're going to talk about actual techniques to go through a book.